although there's a possibility because he was in Ocarina of Time 3D on the 3DS. I don't, and any character that was added during, let's say, previous generations that did not show up this generation, I don't see them either. Like, people naming like Chibi Robo, although I do remember, I think there was like a Chibi Robo like new play control game. It's one random off-put shot, but I don't really see it. And, you know, that kind of thing. Just basically characters that haven't, I didn't go into full detail who I don't see, but they basically take two things from this list. Take two things potentially from what characters I don't see. If they're really random, really from off in left field and make no sense, and they'd be like, you see them on the roster and you're like, how in the world did that character get in there? The chances are they're not going to get into the game. And also, if they didn't show up anywhere near the Wii or DS or 3DS, and they're not retro characters, chances are they aren't going to be in either unless they're very, very super popular. And that's just how I see it. And that's just basically characters I don't see in. They're not really recent, not super popular. Basically, if they're not really recent or if they're really random characters, I don't see it unless they're really, really super popular and can get in as my throwback type character, which we have yet to see in a single game to begin with. So chances of ever seeing a character like that is almost slim to none, but you know what I mean. I'm not trying to attack people's reasons. I'm just saying there are people that name characters that literally stand almost no chance of being in the game. Just saying. I'm not pointing out anybody because a lot of people do it, and you have your reasonings. I mean, if you can find very good reasonings, maybe you could prove it to me or prove it to other people that stuff like this could work. Me personally, I don't see it. Now we're going to get onto actual newcomers, like newcomers I get, and I have a list of 80 plus newcomers here. 80 plus, about 82, 83 newcomers. And I tried to find reasonings for why each one made sense potentially being in there, and then after I go into talking about each one, I'm going to talk about the possibility, would they be there's 5 statuses on the possibility, like the possibility status, and it's going to be right on the picture next to the characters, so you can see it even before I let you guys know. It's going to say possibility, and that's either going to say very good, good, average, unlikely, and very unlikely. And then you know where my stances are on us seeing these potential characters. The first character I'm going to talk about will be the 2nd gen Pokemon trainer. I see, basically, I can see the 2nd gen Pokemon trainer making sense and being in the game because of the 2nd generation remakes on the DS. Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Basically, it was a return to that generation, just like how the first generation returned on the GBA. And their recent remakes, they were on the generation that basically Nintendo would pull characters from. And people do love Gen 2. Gen 2 is quite a popular generation. It's not like it's like a often left field generation that a lot of people despise or anything. 2nd generation is about as much as loved as the original generation. Even a lot of people say they like Generation 2 more. And this is the return to Generation 2. The last time we got a Generation 2 character was in Melee with Pichu. And Pichu was a very off and left field choice for Gen 2. I think a Pokemon trainer Gen 2 with Chikorita as the first evolution, Qualiva as the second evolution, and Feraligatr as the third evolution, trying to change to make sure each starter type is a different evolution, to try to be different, would actually make this trainer kind of, a good choice, a cool character kind of choice that people could probably like, and it changes things up from the original trainer and makes it the character more recent to represent the recent remake. And the possibility I could see of a 2nd generation Pokemon trainer getting in is very good. I think because of the remakes, we could potentially see this character replace the original, in my opinion, or at least be added to the roster because of that. The next character I'm talking about is now the 3rd generation Pokemon trainer. Basically, basically the third generation Pokemon trainer, I feel, but there's a potential, since we're going to be seeing future remakes within the next year or two of third generation of Ruby and Sapphire on the 3DS, they could potentially want to pull a character in there. And if the game is not, if the character is not there, you know, if the games aren't out yet, they could be kind of like a marketing, an advertisement, like how Roy was, because Roy was kind of in his game to advertise the recent game. Either it was coming out or it was already out. You know, it was kind of like an advertisement kind of thing. They could be used to represent the future remakes, or when the game comes out, to potential the potential remakes that are already out on the 3DS of Ruby and Sapphire. Third generation is also pretty popular. Like, all the Pokemon generations have some sort of popularity with some sort of fans, and third generation is actually quite liked. People like Ruby and Sapphire. Those games did initially bring a lot of stuff to the series and made something different, and we've never seen a single third generation Pokemon repped in the game at all. The only chance they, at that point, in this entire Smash Bros. Series point, that they could have potentially got a character would have been Brawl, but they didn't add one. They added Lucario instead because he was recent on the DS. But they could have pulled a character from it, and they missed their opportunity. With the new 3DS remakes potentially coming out, this could be their chance to pull a character, you know, from that game. And I think a Pokemon trainer would also be good, because instead of picking just some random, like, legendary or random Pokemon, I think the Pokemon trainer could also be that. And the choices I see, you know, it potentially getting, I'd see it basically would be the Pokemon Trainer Gen 1 just moved into Generation 3. Like, the same types, the same fire, grass, and water types in the same, evolutions, first, second, third. And, Mudkip would be the water, Blaziken would be the fire, and I forgot, I think it's like Grovyle? I think Grovyle, the second evolution for a grass type, would be like the second evolution. That's how I see the third generation trainer actually working. And Blaziken is like one of the more popular Pokemon from the generation. And I think instead of just randomly putting in Blaziken, it would basically be best just to make it a Pokemon for a trainer. And the third generation trainer does make sense, even though all trainers technically make sense. But with these remakes supposedly coming out, I think this trainer would make a little bit more sense. And the possibility of us ever seeing like a third generation trainer, I would say, is average. I wouldn't say second generation trainer. I think has a higher chance than I think third, because it actually was on the DS, and I do think that second generation was a little more popular than third. But I think it still has a chance, because they're third generation Pokemon coming out with the games eventually, and they're gonna want to put some character in there. And Blaziken's kind of like one of the more popular ones, and it's probably the best chance to get him in. The next character I'm going to talk about will be Adam Malkovich from the Metroid series. He has history with the Metroid series. He was like in Fusion, and I think he might have been in a few other games. I'm not fully sure. Most recently, he was in Metroid Other M, a Wii game, so makes him recent. And he's pretty important to the series. I mean, he was Samus's commanding officer in terms of plotline, the story of the Metroid series. He was her commanding officer when she was in the Federation, when she was like in the Galactic Federation, or whatever that was called. I think that's the name of it. I'm sorry if I messed up the name. And he has in his spacesuit that he basically has in Other M, like his battle armor and his potential guns he could use, he would be totally different from Samus. Like, he wouldn't be able to do like the morph ball and all those Samus things. He'd be a typical space soldier with a blaster. He'd be kind of different in that regard, and he's pretty important to the series, I would say. The possibility for him, I would say, is also average. I mean, he is important, but he wouldn't, I would say, be the best choice for a second Metroid rep if they did get one. So, there's that. The next character I'm going to talk about will be Aaron from Pandora's Tower. Like, Pandora's Tower, because of Pandora's Tower on the Wii, which is a recent game, and actually, even though it's not probably the most popular of the Operation Rainfall trio, It actually has its own fan base and people like the character. He does have kind of a great personality for the game, and especially his weapon style. He has spears and chains. That would offer a lot more different stuff than just another sword user or just another bland kind of character that would have just a basic style. He kind of has a bit of originality with him, and his character does kind of fit. He is kind of popular. It's a new Nintendo IP because technically they basically published it. It may not be directly made by them, but they published it, so it counts as an IP for them. And it's a popular game. It's people seem to enjoy that game. However, I don't see his possibility of being in the game as that great, as I would say average, because while he is original, he is new, he has good moveset potential. He's not necessarily one of the biggest choices for a newcomer in the game, but he does stand a chance. The next one I'll be talking about will be Andy from Advance Wars. Basically, I would say he could be in there because of Advance Wars continuing on from the Game Boy Advance. It survived now 2 generations because it went from the Game Boy Advance to the DS. Had 2 games on there. One of which games doesn't technically represent him. He doesn't represent, but it represents the series in general, which is Days of Ruin. But he's there because of Dual Strike, which is a continuation off of the games from the Game Boy Advance. And basically, the series has history with Nintendo because of the Famicom Wars and the NES Wars and all that stuff from older NES and Super Nintendo stuff. The series has been around before. The Advance Wars is just a newer style to it, and I think he's one of the only characters that makes sense because he's one of the major characters of the game. He was one of the main characters of the original Advance Wars series before they went to Days of Ruin, and his movesets with his wrenches would be different than a lot of other weapons in there, and he is quite popular. And I think he'd make more sense to probably Sammy or Max or Olaf or random characters like that. And he'd make a lot more sense than a Days of Ruin character, because a Days of Ruin character is a one-off thing. His series is basically a 3-series franchise that may potentially be the universe they continue on when they finally put an Advance Wars game on the 3DS. I don't think they're going to continue with the Days of Ruin. I think they're going to continue with his series. And I think he'll still be around. He wasn't the main character in Dual Strike, but he was still there as being a very big character. And he was already there from the previous generation, and he continued on to this one. And he is kind of popular. I would say his chances of possibly being in the game are good. I wouldn't say anything higher, but I'd say he's good because I think he'd be one of the only characters that Advance Wars should get. I mean, I think Advance Wars should get a character, but I think his chances are kind of good. I wouldn't say they're great, very good, but I'd say normally just good. The next character I talk about will be another Metroid character in Anthony Higgs. Now, unlike Adam Malkovich, I don't think he's as important or big in the story. I think he was just added in Other M. I don't think he was in any previous games. He might have been, but I'm not really sure. But he doesn't really have as much popularity, but he plays a kind of big role in Other M, the recent game. Just like Malkovich, he has a unique moveset potential with his space battle armor and his guns. And he would also not be like Samus because of it. However, my possibility for him is very unlikely. Assist trophy status? Maybe. Normal trophy? Maybe. Something in a level? Maybe. I'm sure he's going to be in the game somewhere. He's going to probably be an assist trophy, somewhere in the game. I just don't think he has the biggest chance of being a character. He's possibly there because he's recent, but he doesn't have as big a name as someone like Adam Malkovich. If they wanted to add a Space Galactic Federation, character. So I think he's unlikely. Balloon Fighter would be the next character I talk about. A retro character. I think he'd be like a new addition to the retro roster, for Balloon Fight on the NES. He'd be a new retro representation, so he doesn't have to be recent. I mean, he's a pretty popular character choice. People seem to nominate him quite a lot, and he was actually kind of thought of as a choice in one of the previous Smash Bros. Games I heard, that he was supposedly thought of as being one of the newer characters, but he didn't get in. So basically, there's a chance of they wanted to pull him in an older game, so then maybe they want to now pull him in a newer game. And his balloon fighting style, floating around with the balloon, would be kind of different. It would make him another floaty character, kind of like Jigglypuff, like kind of a floaty character like Jigglypuff and Kirby. Like with his balloon, he'd be like float around, and I mean he'd be kind of different, you know. That's kind of how I see things. But his chances are, I would say, average. The possibility of him being in is average. It might be on the verge of going into good, but it's not very good. I don't see him as one of the retro characters that they're like, we need to get him. I think he's one of the retro characters like, oh, we could possibly get him, but let's see what other choices there possibly could be. I'd say average because he stands a chance.